folks, Free Play Frank. Okay, I want to have a talk with you young folks this week about racism, why it happens and what you can do about it. And then later I'm going to play a cool folk song by Dave Mason, We Just Disagree. Okay, let's get at it. Okay, so we're going to have a discussion here about racism. I'm going to start by explaining why it happens and how it originated and so on. So we're going to start back in ancient times where human beings basically lived like animals before they invented civilization and language and religion and all that stuff. And human beings evolved in Africa near the equator, and they stayed there for millions and millions of years, and I don't think they ever left that area until they learned how to use fire, because they had to stay near the equator because it was warm and because the days were long, and they had to find a place to hide or sleep at night, and no doubt they would have a lookout that would probably watch out for the rest of the family or the tribe while the others were sleeping to protect them from predators and other tribes. And back in those days, there were no white people yet. Everyone was black or brown skinned. And the reason for that was because the pigment in your skin is what protects you from the sun. And when you live near the equator, you have to have more pigment in your skin. That's why their skin is darker, to protect you from the sun's rays, because it's always sunny there all the time. It's always hot. They don't get winter there. And it wasn't until they invented, or didn't invent, but until they learned how to start fires, and then that gave them a light source and a heat source. So that made it possible for people to travel farther north or south away from the equator, where it gets colder and the days are shorter, especially in the winter time. So once they settled in the northern countries over hundreds of thousands of years or however long it took, then they evolved into white people. The white people evolved like in the northern parts of Europe and stuff, Scandinavia and so on. You have white people now, and you still have lots of black people in the world, but for the most part, the black people didn't emigrate north. They usually stayed near the equator. Not sure why that was, but they didn't emigrate all over the world for a long time after white people had already done so. So you can imagine you're in ancient times, and the only source of light you have is a fire. So your family's trying to sleep, and one person's on the lookout to watch out for predators and other people that might come and attack, or because that's how it was back then. They didn't have police or government or anything like that to protect anyone. It was the strongest person survived. So if somebody was stronger than you and they wanted what you had, or they wanted your woman or whatever, they would just take it. And you could fight. You'd have to fight as hard as you could, but if they're already stronger and meaner and more determined than you, then they're probably going to take you out and just take what you have and take over. So they had that fear all the time that was plaguing people. And another fear that happened with ancient people is snakes. Like, I watched Dr. Jordan Peterson's videos a lot on psychology, and one of the things that he always talks about is how ancient people were afraid of snakes, and how all the things that people in modern times are afraid of originated from snakes, like religion and monsters and all those types of things. So here's another idea for you, is you can imagine trying to look out into the night to see if somebody's coming to attack you, and it would be easier to see a white person in the dark coming towards you than it would be to see a black person, especially before they had control of fire, if there were white people back then, but I don't believe there were. Might have been Neanderthals. I'm not sure whether you'd consider them white people or not, but most likely that's why white people have grown to dislike black people so much, is because in those ancient times it was simply easier for a black person to sneak up on someone in the dark and kill them, or do something nasty, than it was for a white person to sneak up on somebody in the dark. So let's fast forward now to the 1960s, when there was a lady named Rosa Parks, and she went on a bus and she sat down on the bus, on the part of the bus that was for white people, because back then, in the 1960s and before that, in America, not so much in Canada, I'm not sure how the rest of the world worked, but in America, they were dividing people between black and white. Like, there's a lot of businesses and buildings that had signs that says whites only, or no blacks allowed, or no Negroes, or something like that. Well, anyways, Rosa Parks sat down on the bus, in the part of the bus that was for white people, and she refused to leave. She was like, I'm going to ride the bus, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that was what started the whole black civil rights. And then of course Martin Luther King and all the ones that came after that, they took over for her and took it to new levels. And the old boys network, we always call it the old boys network, with the white people that ran everything back in those days. And they didn't like black people, and most likely it was just a holdover from those ancient times, like I explained. Because when President Lincoln freed the slaves in 1865, the black people just went to live in America alongside the white people. A lot of them left America. They went to Canada, and I imagine some went back to Africa. I'm not sure how that worked, or they went to other countries if they could. But a lot stayed in America, and they just joined into society as best they could. And there were whole sections in major cities that were all black people. Usually the lower priced areas or less desirable areas would always be taken by black people, and rich white people would take the best areas. And then you had all kinds of other immigrants coming from Europe in the 1800s, and they all had their day of being the victim of racism, like the Irish, Italians, Spanish. They all had their, when the old boys network of whatever white, whatever the white people called themselves back then, I don't know, doesn't matter anyways. But for some reason, that group of people always wanted to they're always trying to do something to another group of people. And that's called the divide and conquer mentality, and it's been going on basically since humanity evolved, where the powers that be have figured out that that's one way that they can keep their power, is by making the lower classes fight and argue amongst themselves, and then they either ignore the rich people and the rich people just get away with doing whatever they want, or they're just too busy fighting stupid things like, oh, I don't like him because he's black, or I don't like her because she's Chinese, or and then the rich people just take over everything, and they just own everything. And one day you wake up and you go, I can't even afford to buy a house, I can't even afford to buy groceries, because people are just too busy arguing and fighting over stupid stuff because of this divide and conquer mentality. You see where I'm going with this, guys? So, okay, let's move up to present day now. Now let's talk about some actual scenarios that could happen right now. Like, suppose there's a Chinese person driving and they're going a little bit too fast because they're late for work or they're late for dinner or something like that, and they cut somebody off in traffic. and a person goes, "You stupid CH," you know the word I'm going to use, but I can't say it here. You know, "Go back to where you come from," or "Learn how to drive," or something like that. Well, that is a heat of the moment type of a response. Now, suppose that was a white person that cut that person off. Like, suppose both people were white, or maybe both people were black, or whatever. Well, the person would still yell at them, but they wouldn't call them the CH word. They'd just call them an idiot, or, you know, "You loser," or something like that, or, you know, I see, like, so a lot of that kind of stuff, like racism and stuff, is just it's comes out of our subconscious in a dark moment, like in the heat of a dark moment, you know, like, you know, something like that, or maybe you hear on the news that somebody got shot and the person that shot him was black, and then you're like, "Oh, those stupid you know the word I'm going to use, I can't say here, you know, they're making all the trouble, or they're causing all the problems," and stuff like that. And it's like, well, no, guys, it was just that one person that committed that one crime. That maybe, so what? That person was black. There's just as many white people commit crimes. You know, maybe not in South Philly or Detroit, or, you know, places where there's lots of black people and not as many white people, but where I live here in Western Canada, there are very few black people, and pretty much every black person I've ever met or interacted with in my entire life has been really nice and straightforward and honest, and you can't ask for better people. Like, I've had some really good friends that are from other countries that are, you know, like, and I've also had some really crummy interactions with other white people. You know, like, it just seems like it's not even the racist thing. A lot of times white people just become like self-righteous or narcissistic or something like that, and I think they have a sense of entitlement to have everything and to do everything and to run everything, and it's like, well, no, we don't, guys. You know, the world's for everybody. Like, everybody has to find their own way, and everybody has to find their own place, and it simply isn't fair or right to call somebody out because they did something wrong and then use the fact that they're not white as a weapon. You see where I'm going with this? Like, we'll take that driver. Like, you could have said, "Hey, learn how to drive," or, you know, something like that, or, "Hey, watch where you're going," or, "Slow down," or, "You're going to be late for your funeral," or, you know, something like that. That's like, you know, what difference does it make that the person was Chinese? You know, just as many white people are crummy drivers, or, you know, reckless drivers. You know, maybe not in China, because there's not that many white people in China. There's mostly Chinese people, so it makes sense that most bad drivers in China might be Chinese. You know, that makes sense. But, you know, it's like, we all have to find some way to exist in this world, and we got to get away from this stupid divide and conquer kind of mentality, and just accept people for as they are, people. And if somebody's good to you, you be good to them. If they're a crook, you know, you don't have to go steal from them too, but just, you can avoid them. Just say, "No, thank you, I'm not interested," or, "Please leave, I don't want anything to do with you, you're a troublemaker," or, "I'm not interested." But don't say, "Oh, I don't want anything to do with you because you're an NIG, you know what." Like, that's not right. You know, it's not right to turn around and make somebody, like, weaponize the fact that they're not the same color as you just because, you know, you're angry in that moment, or somebody did something that you didn't like, or, you know, like, just deal with them from one person to another. Don't bring the fact that they're different race or different skin color or religion or something that you are into the conversation. Like, that, basically, that's the simplest way to deal with it. Like, what I've found in my life is there are lots of times where there have been people that are from other countries that come here, and they want to make a lot of money in a hurry at somebody else's expense or some deal like that, right? So they're trying to wheel and deal, and they're trying to get me to sell them something cheaper. They're trying to get me to work for them cheaper or stuff like that. And I've figured out that what you do is you just say, nope, this is what I'm asking for my thing that I'm selling here, and if you can't afford to pay for that, then I'm just going to hold on to it until the next buyer comes along, and maybe they'll be able to afford to buy it from me. And, don't bring in the fact that the person's not the same color as you. Just leave that part of it out and just say, no, my price is firm, or no, I can't afford to work for you that cheap because I can't afford to pay my bills if that's all the money I'm going to make. That's all you have to do to handle that. You don't have to say anything more than that. Like, once you say no, a person has to recognize that you've set a boundary and you're not going to cross that boundary. And if they keep trying to push you to change your mind, you're going to start to get agitated. And as you get agitated, that's when the racial slurs might come out. So you got to be mindful of that, and don't do that. And especially don't do it like if you're in school and there's another kid there that's not the same nationality or skin color as you. Don't ever do anything like that where, even if they're like a smaller or younger, weaker kid than you, don't ever say anything like, you're stupid because you're a CH or you're an NI, Don't ever say anything like that. Just treat them the same as everybody else. If they're good to you, you be good to them. If they're not good to you, then you don't do anything with them. Avoid them, and leave the racial stereotyping, all that stuff out of it. That's the best way to handle it. So, hope you guys got something out of this talk here today, and thanks for watching.
In a way, haven't seen you in a while. How have you been? Have you changed your style? And do you think that we've grown up differently? Don't seem the same. And have you lost your feel for me? So let's leave it alone, 'cause we can't see eye to eye. There ain't no good guy, there ain't no bad guy. There's only you and me, and we just disagree. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Oh, oh. I'm going back to a place that's far away. How about you? Have you got a place to stay? Why should I care when I'm just trying to get along? We were friends, now it's the end of our love song. So let's leave it alone, 'cause we can't see eye to eye. There ain't no good guys, there ain't no bad guys. There's only you and me, and we just disagree. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Oh, oh. So let's leave it alone, 'cause we can't see eye to eye. There ain't no good guys, there ain't no bad guys. There's only you and me, and we just disagree. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Oh, oh. All right, thanks guys for joining me tonight, and we'll see you all next time. Good night, everybody.